But you know what the real joke is here? It's our immigration intake. Now, I've said that for a long time, but incredibly now even a minister of the Albanese government agrees with me, Mark Thistlethwaite, the Assistant Minister for Immigration.
Migration's been unresponsive to Australia's needs. It's provided marginal economic benefit and hasn't enhanced labour productivity. It's been concentrated in capital cities, creating some social tension, and skill shortages have persisted.
It's like a line out of my columns. Now, Thistlethwaite says, oh, no, this government's now going to fix it. It was all the previous government's fault. Yeah, well, I believe that when I see it. But let's not forget that government after government told us that high immigration is good for us. And here we have a Labor minister admitting, no, it hasn't done us much good at all. I mean, just today, the ABC reports that 500,000 people that were brought in here as skilled workers, we were told, oh, we really need these skilled workers. They aren't actually doing skilled work at all, not much of it. Some are just stacking shelves. Joining me every Tuesday is Nationals Senator Matt Canavan, the former Resources Minister. Matt Canavan, good to see you again. Here we've got an Albanese government minister letting the cat out of the bag. Voters have been absolutely conned by politicians claiming mass immigration is good for us.
Well, I welcome someone saying the truth from the Labor government. It is absolutely true, and although to try to blame it on the former government is a little bit rich when the borders were closed for almost all of the last term of the former government due to COVID. The new government, the Albanese government, elected just months after we opened our international borders, had a job to do. We were coming out of COVID, and of course, we had to restart some level of migration. But people forget now, I think probably Matt Thistlethwaite has forgotten, that at the time, the Labor government's immigration minister was crowing about the fact that we're working through this backlog of visa requests. We're speeding up the process. We're going to basically approve everything. And that's a promise they did meet, because Labor has brought in an astounding more than 1 million people in net terms in this country over just their first 2 years in office. That's two Canberras in 2 years. And that's principally the reason why we have tents propping up in our major cities to house people. There aren't enough houses around. It's why rents are soaring and people can't afford to live here in this country anymore. That has to be stopped. The government is trying to close the gate now after the horse has bolted. It's a bit late to be admitting these things now, but I suppose better late than never, Andrew. We have to have a migration program, but it has to be sensibly set in accordance with Australians' needs first.
Matt Canavan, I've been puzzling about something all day when it's jogged my memory. In 2001, during the pandemic, we flew Australians from India during the COVID crisis. They had no other option. You know, you remember how things were then with flights being grounded and all that. It charged people $10,000 a seat. Now the Albanese government is charging nothing for the Lebanese Australians who's evacuating from Lebanon, even though it had warned them for weeks to come home on commercial flights, and even though there are still some commercial flights they could take. Can you explain why Lebanese Australians are getting free flights when Indian Australians had to pay $10,000?
Well, I think probably there's a bit of error here on maybe both sides. I mean, I remember that Indian repatriation issue well because I, at the time, was supporting us bringing Australians home from India when, at least for a few weeks, the government refused to even fly them home at all. My view is that we do have an obligation to Australians anywhere in the world. You're a government, should help you out if there's a time of natural disaster, war or plague is afflicting where you are. There should be some help and assistance provided. So charging $10,000 to an Australian to take you home, I think, was excessive. Charging nothing is probably too far down the other end of the spectrum as well. And maybe some contribution should be made if a person can make that contribution. Obviously, there probably needs to be circumstances of help and assistance to any Australians who can't afford to make a payment. So I just think there should be some common sense applied here. But look, I think we overreacted in the pandemic, and now the government just seems desperate to look like they're doing something in the Middle East for their own domestic political purposes.
More pandering, I'm afraid. If you refuse to help yourself, I'm not quite sure what the obligation of taxpayers is to help you. Then, with our money.
Well, we help people in natural disasters. If a natural disaster afflicts you in Australia, you get help from the government. If you're overseas, I think some help is merited too.
if you've been warned for months to leave or weeks to leave and you didn't, and if you could actually move somewhere else in Lebanon, or if you could take a commercial flight, or you could cross the border on your own steam, there are other options. I'm not quite sure why we're on the hook for it. Now, Matt, Four Corners last night, the ABC, typical, did a hit job on nuclear power. You know, the coalition's plans to bring it here, specifically on the plans to bring it here. Now, you can judge the bias of this program by the so-called experts that it talked to, who included, believe it or not, Malcolm Turnbull, who loathes the Liberals for sacking him as Prime Minister. Plus, of course, tycoon activist Simon Holmes à Court, who is not a nuclear expert, but did finance the Teal independence and is another renewables zealot. Here they are.
2, 4, 6, 8. The cost of gigs is too great.
How would you describe a policy to build 7 nuclear plants in Australia?
Recklessly stupid and dangerously stupid.
Meanwhile, demand is going up because nuclear cannot supply the energy that we need in the time frame we need it, right? That's an absolutely critical point, that time frame.
Your assessment of this ABC hit job on nuclear power for Australia?
Well, look, it's a total farce, Andrew. I don't watch the ABC. I miss that program. I don't think I miss much. And I think I suppose the only thing we can be thankful for is that the bias of the ABC is now so transparent that I think most Australians, if not all Australians watching that program, understand where they're coming from, that it probably won't change too many minds because it doesn't seem to be a mind-changing exercise, as you say. Why would you get people like Malcolm, like Simon Holmes à Court, who are obviously wedded to a particular viewpoint, to spruik these issues? And with all respect to Malcolm, he obviously had some success in business. You know, I just don't think communication is his skill set, not political communication. I mean, that kind of language just turns people off. Just stick to the facts, Malcolm. You don't need to over-egg it like that. And he failed as a Prime Minister, and I think he's failing as a commentator in his post-politics job too.
Well, don't forget he was the one that promised us the snowy 2.0 renewable energy scheme, and it said it would cost us just $2 billion. It's costing $20 billion, and it's way behind it, and it may never actually be used. I don't know. It looks like a white elephant. Matt Canavan, thank you so much for your time.